the second part of our programme from Strasbourg this week, and Andrew Bronze has just gone off to deliver a lambasting speech against the BBC, as you probably will have heard. We're joined by Andrew Moffat, who is one of our main advisors here in Strasbourg, in the European Parliament. Of course, Nick is still with us. We're going to talk a little bit about prisoners' votes, and it's been a subject here that a lot of people have been talking about. Where do you see we are on this, Andrew?
Well, this was a European Court of Human Rights decision some time ago, which demanded that prisoners, hardened criminals, should have the right to vote in Britain. So we have criminals who have forfeited their liberties by bowing out of society, creating crime, committing dreadful acts, and suddenly they're to be elevated onto the same status as the law-abiding. If there's one thing that really demonstrates the nonsensical backdrop to the European project, it's this, and similar such deliberations by the European Court on such matters as asylum seekers, migrants who commit dreadful acts. We can't send them back to their own countries. It's sort of pie-in-the-sky, cuckoo, cloud cuckoo, politically correct nonsense that's trotted out on a sort of yearly basis by the European Court of Human Rights. And if it gives an example why we should leave the European Union and depart from the entire project. Yeah. It's evident in the eyes of the electorate.
I think it's important that people understand that there is a difference between the European project and the European Parliament and this system and so on, because of course the European Court and the European Parliament are two wholly separate things. We don't have any control over them. They go off and do these crazy things, and this place does crazy things in turn, but there's not a direct connection between them, but they are part of the overarching project of building a European superstate. And English common law in particular, for us in Britain, is so much is one of the fundamentals of our identity, our freedoms, our constitution, our way of being British, that it's one of the main blocks in the way of the whole project. So of course it's had to go. And when the Tories sit here and they make Eurosceptic noises sometimes, but they're part, and Cameron in particular, is part of this drive for ever greater union that the Tories signed us up to. The whole British political elite is, although the other day the MPs had this big vote where they voted to reject what the European Court was saying. What a farce. These are the same people, these are the same parties which have subjected us to the European project in general and the European Court in particular. How on earth can they complain when the chickens come home to roost? If you're going to be part of a liberal totalitarian European federal superstate, then don't complain when they take away your old laws and when they do things that ordinary people don't like. You've either got to be in it and give up, or take our position, as Andrew says, get the hell out.
Yeah, I take a more practical side to the votes for prisoners dilemma, and it's with the amount of Labour MPs actually being banged up now almost on a daily basis. It's not good for us.
Well, the Tories, they've had their share too, don't they?
Indeed.
Jeffrey Archer and some of the others.
More seriously, looking at this uninspiring agenda, and it truly is uninspiring this time around, we do have some continuation of this very vindictive attitude this place has towards Russia, and you picked on something. We were working on something today on a resolution that's going on with regards to law in Russia. Now, surely that should be a matter for the Russian people, I would have thought. What goes on?
It's like that one we had the other day, wasn't it? With Lithuania, the EU intruding into the affairs of Lithuania. It was a Section 28 type thing. The Lithuanians had reached a decision at their own in their own parliament, and here was the politically correct body of the European Union bearing down on them, producing a resolution, as I recall, which censored them for this, and doubtless is going to force them to change their view, change their law. But this one, we haven't had time to scrutinise this fully, but it refers to an ongoing criminal case against Jehovah's Witnesses, of all things. And it refers to a law under Article 282, Part 1 of the Russian Criminal Code, which includes incitement to hatred or enmity and denigration of human dignity. Well, seems to be something wrong here, because the European Union is absolutely awash with this sort of thing. So it's an instance of the kettle calling the pot black, I think, in some large measure. And of course there's some reference to the European Court of Human Rights, so they're trying to foister upon the Russian people a whole panoply of politically correct laws, and the Russian people, I think, are just going to tell them to get lost. I can't see the Russian government taking this in any amicable sense. And of course, what right has the European Union to tell a sovereign country, what competence has it got to tell a sovereign country of some considerable size
and power
how it should run its own laws? It really is bizarre. Who do these people think they are?
I mean, it's a common thread, isn't it, Nick, this anti-Soviet, anti-Russian, should I say, anti-Russian river that runs through this place.
There's something extra here. It's not just a matter of them looking to tell other countries what to do. They do it with everyone. Any little thing happens somewhere in the world, and they've got to say their thing, and we have to have a debate here about something that's just happened in Malaysia or Cambodia or wherever. Tensions between Cambodia and Thailand. I think that's on the minutes, actually. The Thais and the Cambodians are having a fallout. God knows what about. Who cares? It's up to them. And yet we've got to have time spent here, debating it when there's actually serious issues we could be debating. So they do that with everyone. But there's a special way that they treat Russia, and it's constantly Russia's talked down to, regarded with suspicion. Russia is a problem. Every other country is an opportunity, other than Iran. That's another one. But basically Iran, but particularly Russia, people just like us. In fact, there's something especially bad about them, and it's wrong. It's very dangerous. The whole of Western Europe and liberal Europe has had this thing. It's okay for us or for the Americans to push the borders of NATO all the way to the borders of Russia. Now, when Germany was reunited, that was never agreed. As a matter of fact, it's something which was done when Russia was in turmoil and was weak, and it's created in Russia a feeling of intense suspicion and resentment, which is simply unhealthy. And to treat a serious world power as if it was some little, two-bit pariah banana republic is very, very foolish. And again, the Russians see this, and this is coming from a liberal left elite in places like Poland and places like France and places like Germany. And the Russians, they've got fairly long memories, like our people have. And I know they sit there and they think, you bastards, if it wasn't for us, you'd still be ruled by the Nazis. It was the Russians who broke that particular tyranny. Admittedly, Stalin was a tyrant too, but that's how the Russians look at it, that we saved your bacon, and we're a serious country, and we keep you warm in the winter, and you kick us around the place. It's not a good way to run a relationship. The old traditional, when Britain was at her best in terms of foreign policy, yes, there was an element of balance of power. Politics played in sort of near Europe. There was also an understanding that different big countries had their different sphere of influence. And if you look at most of the wars and problems, other than those caused by Islam and multiculturalism, they're always caused by one big country starts interfering in the sphere of influence of another. And the sensible thing to do is to recognise that parts of Eastern Europe are, of course, within the Russian sphere of influence. And while we would think it very bad if Russia was to go stomping all over Lithuania and so on, what happens in Lithuania is of more concern to Russia than it is to us, because it's on the border. But this place, it wants to meddle and interfere, and with the Russians, it always wants to put them down, and no good will come of it.
No. Swapping subjects entirely now, coming off the scheduled agenda, we have a way of expressing opinions here by way of written declaration, and we've put a few in. We're working on a couple at the moment with regards to treatment of animals in zoos, all the way to the scandal of Islamic abuse. I won't say grooming is too soft a word. Abuse, rape of our children. And we had a knock on the door yesterday afternoon from another
very nice lady came in, and she is sponsoring, if you like. She's certainly the power behind this resolution, which has been embraced by a British MEP, and it concerns the death of her daughter, a very tragic death, who was caught in the slipstream, or perhaps on the side of a lorry. And these large juggernauts have a number of blind spots. As cyclists, and I cycle frequently, as cyclists all too well know.
And motorcyclists are small cars as well, actually.
Yes, motorcyclists too, especially motorcycles, but they can't be seen. And all she wanted was a number of safety measures incorporated onto lorries, mirrors and so on, so that the drivers can see what is alongside those lorries. Well, we'd already discussed this, and we decided that we wanted to support this lady whose daughter died tragically by the side of one of these big juggernauts. The driver couldn't see that she was there cycling her bicycle, and so we signed her resolution. And I asked her, I said, I hope you've got a lot of support from the other British MEPs in this very worthwhile motion. Well, she said, not from UKIP. And I said, well, that's very strange, and what did they have to say? Well, she said, they're not prepared to sign any resolution because it means that they have to recognise the authority of the Commission, the European Commission, to legislate. Well, I said, of course, this is absolute nonsense, because they do legislate, and then UKIP votes when they're here, and they're often not here. UKIP then votes on that legislation. So on that same basis, they shouldn't be voting at all, because that legislation emerges from the European Union.
In any case, it's some of these written declarations call on the Commission to do things and force things on nation states. But not all of them do. Others call on, especially those which are created by people from the Eurosceptic wing of the Parliament here. They call upon the Commission to remind nation states, for instance. So there's no compulsion there. So we looked at this and debated what we were going to do about these, because they're quite an important part of the parliamentary process in terms of MEPs actually having a chance to put views across, instead of them always coming from the unelected Commission. So we looked at this very early on, as you know, and decided, well, if there's a written declaration, even if it's in a good cause, which goes about its business by calling for more powers for the European superstate, then we will refuse to sign. So we had one, for instance, on breast cancer a couple of months ago, and we were lobbied quite intensively on it. Obviously a very, very good cause, but they wanted to deal with it by having an overall overarching European authority and so on. So in my case, I explained to the people, no, I'd love to sign because it's a good cause, but I can't. But I gave them a donation instead, to the cause back in Britain. So some of those things we say no, because it would add to the power of this place. But very often, as I say, they're simply advisory, or they're saying we urge the nation states to do this, and there's no compulsion, there's no question of more power coming here. So for UKIP to come up with that blanket excuse, what it actually is they're bloody lazy.
Well, that's
they simply don't do the work.
They are lazy, and a number of them weren't there in the chamber today. There were some important initiatives, and a number of important UKIP MEPs just didn't bother to turn up. And there's another point there. We know that out of the entire Parliament, not just the British contingent, but out of the entire Parliament, the two people with the lowest ratings, or certainly in the bottom decile, are two MEPs from the United Kingdom, and they're both UKIPers. They're at the bottom of the British contingent, and very nearly at the bottom of the entire parliamentary contingent.
They actually turn up literally just enough to get paid. So there's not a principle here. If there was a principle, you could say, after all, we're elected on quite a broad range of policies and positions. Obviously, we're best known for immigration, but anyone who's taken the trouble to look at where we stand on things on our website, they know that we cover a huge range of issues, and that very often, a few years after we've covered them, the other parties are all rushing to play catch-up, one way or another. Whereas UKIP is a single-issue operation, and so they're there on the anti-EU thing, and a principal position for them would have been, in fact, total non-attendance, non-involvement. Elect us and we won't go. It's what Sinn Féin did for years and so on. That'd be principled. Or, you're electing us, and in their election literature, just as we do, they say, elect us, send us to Brussels to watch out for British interests. That's what people have voted for. The people weren't told, elect for us and vote for us and we won't turn up, as a matter of principle. That would have been a legitimate thing to do, but they didn't do that. Instead, they said, as we did, vote for us and send us to act as your eyes and ears and the watchdogs, and to do what little good we can and to block bad things. You can't do that unless you're here. and very often they're not. We are.
On that basis, we've run out of time. I'm getting signals to say that they want us off. So, Andrew, thank you. Nick, thank you. We're back probably a couple of weeks' time with more footage from the European Parliament.